Okay, so today we're going to work on problem 112. Problem 112 isn't much different than the previous problems, except that now we've added the fact that we're adding diagonal lines. So let's take a look and see at how we're going to approach that. So I'm going to start drawing this part in the lower left-hand corner right here, and I'm going to work my way up. I'm going to go to my AutoCAD, and I'm going to start by just turning off my grid. I won't need my grid at all. I'm going to turn off my snap. I'm going to actually turn off everything just to start. We'll turn it on as needed. One more time back to the drawing. So as we look at this, we need to come up by 1 inch. Take note, the 1 inch dimension is way over here. We're going to come up by 1 inch, and then this diagonal is going to be 1.75 inches in the X dimension, which we get from here, and then it's going to be 3 inches, the 2 plus the 1, in the Y dimension. So let's go ahead and just draw that. So I'm going to start with my line, and I can start anywhere. And as you take a look as I'm moving around, I can sort of see the size of my grid. So if I'm over here, I see my grid size. My first point is at 8 relative to 0, 0. That's going to be somewhere down here. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Anyway, I'll start here, and what did I not do? Well, I didn't turn my orthogonal on. So first I'm going to turn orthogonal on. So now I'm going to do orthogonal lines. And I just hit 1 because I'm going to make a 1 inch line. And you can see I blew my grid up far too much because my 1 inch line happens to be that big. So here I have to make a diagonal line. And that diagonal line, let's go back and take a quick look at it again. 1.75 in the X from here, and 3 inches in the Y from here. So I need to turn my orthogonal off, and then I'm going to type at 1.75, comma 3, and hit return. And that puts in the second line. I'm going to go ahead and center this, and now we can see roughly the size of our drawing. We probably shouldn't need to center this again or zoom it at all. I'm going to come back over here. We're going to move over by 1 inch in the X, and then down by 2 inches in the Y. I'm going to come back to my drawing. I'm going to move over by 1. Again, remember, once we're moving in a certain direction, we can just type a number. However, I'm not orthogonal. So I either need to make myself orthogonal, or alternatively, I can turn on my snap mode. Okay, this is the snap as we end the drawing. This will be our snap reference lines, object snap tracking. So we can turn on our polar tracking, and then we can set our angles. The angles don't, in our case, don't really matter. But when we have polar tracking on, now we can see our vertical line. And we can see a horizontal line. Now, the reason I did this is because this prevents me from having to go back and forth in orthogonal. So it's sort of a way to have an orthogonal mode or an orthogonal option without really going into orthogonal. If I go into orthogonal, which is fine, I can only draw in X and Y. And I could do that, but then when I come back over to the other side of the drawing, over here, I would have to leave orthogonal mode in order to draw that line. I don't believe if I put in the reference points directly, it will draw a diagonal line. It's possible it will. But anyway, I do want to show the use of these reference lines. Now note orthogonal mode actually turns off polar tracking. So you can use one or the other. But again, I'm going to use polar tracking. And I generally prefer polar tracking. So here at an angle of 0 degrees, to check our drawing again, we need to go over by 1 inch, 2.75 minus 1.75, and then down by 2 inches. So we head in this direction, we type 1 and hit enter, and then we head in the downward direction, type 2 and hit enter. Continuing back, we have to ask ourselves, where is this point? So right now we're at 2.75 inches over from this corner, and we need to come back to 1.5 inches. So we need to move over by 1.25. So we're going to move to the negative y by 1.25, and then move down by 1. And did we freeze up? There we go. We're back. Okay, so we need to move in this direction by 1.25. And then we need to move down by 1. Now we're going to move over by 3.5, up by 1, and over by 1.25 since this is symmetrical. So over by 3.5. So we're going in this direction. We type 3.5, enter. Start moving up. We type 1. And we move over here, and we go back by 1.25. Now, if you have a good memory, we remember that we're coming up by 2 here. So we're going to move in this direction, and then type 2. And then we're going to move over in this direction by 1. Okay, so to put this diagonal in, we now know we're going down by 2 and going over in the x direction by 1.75. And again, if we could come back to the drawing here, y is minus 2, and the x will be 1.75. And again, because this drawing is completely symmetrical. Now, I should point out that typically on a drawing like this, there'll be a center line to show that this is symmetrical, so that the center line will actually basically say that one side is exactly symmetrical to the other side. But additionally, the fact that this dimension is 1.25, is 1 inch, and this dimension is 1.5, and this is 1, that has to mean that this angle is actually the same. And if the angle is the same, then the x has to be the same and the y has to be the same. So even though that 1.75 isn't given, it's basically inferred here. So anyway, so we come back over here, and now we're going to type at 1.75, comma, minus 2, and then hit return. And I think I did that wrong. Let's go back to the drawing. It's not minus 2, it's minus 3. How did I know that? Well, I knew that because as I looked over here, I saw that the space here, the width, was a lot wider than the width here. And you can also see that the diagonal doesn't come down as far. So we can come down here, type U, return for undo, to correct our mistake, and now we can type the correct coordinates. We have to type at 1.75, comma, minus 3. And now our drawing looks more symmetrical. So to finish this off, we're going to come down in this dimension with a length of 1. So once we see that green line going downward, we type 1 and hit enter. And then finally we move back to the start. And I could try to end this exactly, but I don't actually have object snap. I suggest if you don't have object snap, you don't actually do that, even though you know it's 6.5 and that's correct, because you could be off a little bit. So if I turn on the object snap, then you'll see the box. And if you see the box, then it's okay. Without the box, all you have to do is get the line moving in that direction. We go back to the drawing for a second, you can see that the length is 6.5. So once we're moving in that dimension, we just type 6.5 and hit enter. Hit escape. Okay, so we're going to save this one. We are complete, so file, save as, and we're going to call this IC3 underscore 1-12. Save. And that's it. So it's really not hard to do a diagonal line. You just have to figure out what the x and the y coordinates are. So as you add the x and the y coordinates, you're almost always going to be using relative addressing. So generally you're always going to be typing the at symbol. And just make sure when you type the at symbol that you need, if you're moving in a negative direction toward a lower x, or down, not down, but on the horizontal axis to the left, that x should be negative. If you're moving to the right, x should be positive. For the y dimension, you have to make sure that if you're moving down in the vertical axis, that y is negative, and if you're moving up on the vertical axis, then y is going to be positive. Okay, I'm going to end this video.